love that
I haven't been
mug.
to Nigeria yet. I have to go. That's the nice
You
opening, but I know you
must
have to
go.
go. I know.
Yeah. It's very interesting. There was a lot of conversation about that at this event last night. Anyway, good morning. Gosh, you could barely shut us up, Daniele. There, I thought we could
Couldn't.
have just carried on ranting. People could have
We
heard
could
what we were
have.
talking about. Yeah. Good morning to anyone if you're watching us live, either on LinkedIn. Good morning. Please do say good morning if you are with us, or if you're watching live on the YouTube as well. We were just saying, Daniela, you were saying you don't normally get up this early, right?
I don't.
Is that?
I'm not a morning person. I'm definitely an evening person.
Ah, you see, I am a morning person. I am wondering, somebody has asked me about whether I would do this later, but I think people are usually logged off LinkedIn after the workday, right? Should I do an evening live? Should
You
I
can
go
always
live
try it.
in
You
an
can always
evening?
try it.
Maybe. We will see. We will see. But Daniele, how's your week been? How's your week been?
My week's been good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been doing some really, really good work this week with new
Yeah.
clients. So,
Yeah.
speaking to a lot of men.
Yes, good. Well, we're going to be getting into that. For anybody that doesn't know Daniele, and I'm thinking nobody must not know Daniele, especially if they're watching this and if they know my content. Daniele Fiandaca, an accountant by background, a little bit like me. So you got two accountants, two chartered accountants talking about inclusion. What is it with finance people? A lot of finance people do seem to move into this work. Do you think it's that we get fed up of the numbers? We get fed up of the ones and O's, and we
Yeah,
want to talk
I
to
think
real
it's
people.
any opportunity to get out. I mean, my get out initially was advertising, and probably my move into inclusion was probably to get out of advertising rather than finance. But yes,
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. So, for anybody that doesn't know Daniele, please do go and check out what Daniele does. But as it says on your description, there, founder of Token Man Consulting. Just tell for anybody that hasn't heard the story, just tell us about how and why Token Man was born, Daniele.
yeah. So I think it's 12 years ago now. So I mentioned I used to work in advertising. I used to run something called Creative Social, was a collective of creative directors around the world. So at our peak, we had 450 creative directors, but we only had 26% more women. And while that was far more representative of the industry famously only had 13%. I really felt that some of the events that we did, I just felt that they were quite laddie, quite, and I kind of thought when we went to Tokyo, for example, I just came away from that going, actually, we just need to change the cult. We just need to change the atmosphere, because I can imagine if you're a woman coming into that, that's not going to be that inclusive. And so I organized a dinner for 12 women. When I walked into a room, it wasn't a surprise when it was me and 12 women, because I organized it. I co-funded it. But what was a surprise is what happened next, which is I lost my confidence. And anyone that knows me quite well says that's not possible, but it really did happen. And then we sat down for dinner, and the conversations happening around me, I just didn't resonate with. So what I found myself doing is being pushed further out. And then when I got up to introduce the dinner, my co-host, who's a very good friend of mine, she cut me off, even to the extent that 2 years later, I met quite a few of those creative directors, and I said, "How come you never got involved in Creative Social?" She said, "We didn't even realize that that's what you were doing." So I couldn't even ask them. So on one hand, you could say that was an absolute disaster because I didn't recruit a single person from this. But also, on the other hand, that's the dinner that changed my life, because
Yeah.
just having that experience really woke me up. And again, I've got my little. I love this. My favourite new badge, but it really did. It
There
really
you
did
go.
wake me up to the challenges. And initially, I came in through gender initially, but since then, I've seen the damage that focusing just on gender can do on other historically marginalised groups. I always look at intersection, and I make sure I'm supporting everyone. But I realised that there was a world that I just didn't understand that other people were living. And for me, while I thought there's no way that my behaviours impacted that world, but I started to realise that actually little things did, and actually I was making I was excluding people, good and very
Mm.
easy example, but is management meeting on a Tuesday. As soon as I saw Pete, there was 10 men, 2 women. Whenever I saw Pete, I would talk about the football. In that particular case, the 2 women had no interest in football, so I realised I was pushing them further out. So from that day onwards, I never talked about the
Yeah.
football on a Tuesday morning, and I made an effort to engage with the women. But also, what I realised is if looking at the system and the system being broken, if I am not changing that system, then I'm complicit with that system. So for me, it was
Yeah.
all about changing, and also I'm also a hacker. I love fixing things. So for me, what I saw going back 11 years ago was no minority in history has ever affected change without support of the majority. And I,
Mm.
as someone that likes to solve problems, I kind of looked at it and I went, wait a sec, I'm not only am I not being invited into the rooms where these conversations are happening, I often, if I am in those rooms, I often don't feel welcome. Um, and so I just thought there had to be a better way of actually accelerating change. And that better way for me was engaging men and engaging men in a way that they can speak openly, engaging men
Mm.
in a way that they feel comfortable, engaging men in a way that will help inspire them go along the journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, and interesting how you describe the journey actually. And what one of the things I think is interesting, and now I wasn't expecting to start with this question, but why not, right? One of the things I sometimes hear men that have come to this work, or men particularly that are really strong on like the male allyship and the importance of that. Often, a lot of them talk about their light bulb moment being, for example, if they have a sister or a daughter, or they think about it in that concept. But for you, actually, it was slightly different. You almost like you had like a different experience that made you think actually other people are experiencing something different. Do you know what I mean? And I'm always wondering how easy is it for men to like have that light bulb moment, particularly if they are in, sort of positions of privilege.
I think for me that's I mean you're right, Shell. We have to create those light bulb moments. So for me, um, listen, the business case for diversity has been forever, right? We've got the business case, we've got the proof, but nothing's changing. So what is it? So a lot of the work that I do
Mm,
when I work with clients is I have to get men to feel it, and that's quite hard to get men to feel it when
mm,
men. Bell Hooks, my favourite feminist of all time, wrote the book *The Will
mm,
to Change*, and in it she talks about men being disconnected with their feelings. How can I get people to feel something if they're not feeling something in their own lives? So I think so. If you look at all the men's work I do, we start every single session. It doesn't matter what the men's work is, but if it's men only, I start with a session with a feelings wheel, and I get people to pick a feeling. I give them choices. I said, if you want to be vulnerable, find a feeling you felt really uncomfortable with, or if you just want to be, this is the first time, feel free to just how you're feeling now. And a lot of people just come if they've never done it before, they will say anxious, right? Um, but the reality is getting those men, and then I put them in pairs, and they then talk about their feelings to each other and what's behind it. It is, without a doubt, it's the most powerful thing I've ever done. And I'm going to give a shout out to Josh Connolly because I'm part of Uncommon Man London, and I learnt it from him.
yeah,
But I think so. Think for me, what we have to do is find the opportunity for them to connect to something. So
yeah,
if you hear me probably with a senior leader, you'll probably think, "My God, he's going everywhere." But I'm just trying to work out where's that entry point. So yes, it
hmm,
can be. I mean, I don't. If I look at the gender equality, look at gender equality. When I hear men saying, "Of course I believe in gender equality," I've got daughters. I'm literally. My eyes, you could hear my eyes rolling, right? Because I'm like, what? So men haven't had daughters for centuries. What's that got to do with anything?
yeah,
And I will say a but there are quite a few men who do lean into this more because they've got
yeah,
daughters, and we've got to use
yeah,
that. But it's also simple things like, increasingly we're not. If I go into the senior leadership team, I would be surprised if there's someone in there that hasn't got someone in the family that is autistic, and so
mm,
going down, talking about autism and talking
Yeah.
about, the barriers that autistic people have is something that will really resonate. So a lot of the times I'm just trying to find what will resonate, what they can connect to, so
Yeah.
they can actually feel it rather than have this kind of, oh, diversity is important. And we have to, I'm sure you've heard the adage about the two fishes, but we have to get people to see the water. I never, going back 11 years ago, I didn't see the water.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting when you talked about, sort of starting with feelings, and I definitely want to get onto that. The first question that I sort of wanted to ask was, obviously, we both know, obviously, because of the work we do as well, that there has been this backlash and this wave, and I was kind of thinking, do you think we have, and I would say, like, almost like lost men? So has this work, the work that you do in particular in terms of engaging men with inclusion, has that been pushed back because of the backlash, if that makes sense? Almost like, have we lost men to the backlash?
I think the men are the backlash. I think the
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I think the backlash does come from, and listen. I've been part of the EDI industry for 8 years, right? And
Yeah.
and the work that the industry does in general is fantastic. I want to be really clear about that.
Yeah.
But what it hasn't done, and this is really disappointing, it hasn't taken responsibility for the fact that it has, in my opinion, it's got engaging men wrong.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons Donald Trump is partly because of the EDI the EDI movement, because what that movement has done is it hasn't spoken to men meaningfully. It hasn't actually brought men into the conversation. It hasn't said, and it's also excluded some of the men that come from historically marginalized groups. So a good example is white working class men. They're just ignored by EDI, and you're like, well, wait a sec, they're marginalised as well. And so I think there's an element of uh, confusion. I think so. The first
Hmm.
thing is I know how the if someone said to me, check my privilege, like 10, 11 years ago, I know what response that would put in me, and that would just put an angry defensive response. How dare how dare you, kind of thing. But now I understand privilege, right? And it's important that the privilege puts a responsibility on me, and that's a lot of what I'm working with senior leaders on. But I do think people have got confused between privilege and privileged. And what you
Hmm.
see a lot of the backlash is from language, and someone saying that a white man has privilege, they sometimes will hear you saying they're privileged. And so what they'll do is
Yeah.
that's where you get the backlash, because it's like they're not actually looking, okay, if I was in a room in exactly the same scenario going for a job as a white man, same socioeconomic background, everything's the same. The only difference is one person's white, one person's black. That's what privilege is, right? Is that this person here, we know the black person will have more barriers. But they don't hear it like that. So I think so.
Yeah.
Um, if you look at some of the terminology, so I won't talk about the patriarchy. I just won't, simply because I know what impact it used to have on me. But I also know what impact it has on men. So like smash the patriarchy.
Mm.
People here smash men, right? And
Yeah.
that's not a good place to start. So I just talk about the system and how the system's broken. So for
Yeah.
me, words are really powerful, and I think we have to just think about the words where we bring men on the journey. And I think it's probably worth me bringing in a
Hmm.
set, Cheryl, but I haven't got my nails on. Otherwise, we'll probably talk about, you've talked about Take a Man Consulting, but I am also co-founder with Sam Conifer-Lende of Hard as Nails, which is an initiative to get men to paint their nails, to have meaningful conversations around healthy masculinity, harmful stereotypes, and mental health. Um,
Yeah.
my nails are painted 60, 70% of the time. The reason they're not painted today is because I did a couple of pieces of work this week with new clients and meeting men for the first time. And so I know, unfortunately, we're still in a world where I will get judged for wearing nail polish. And I know that I might lose just because of what I look like. I might lose one or two people from
Yeah.
that first session. So for me, what I'm trying to do is meet men where they're at, so I can
Yeah.
then take them on a journey.
Yeah, I'm so tempted to go down a rabbit hole of what polish you have, but we'll save that because I'm getting my nails done later. We'll
I will.
save that
I
for.
will. You know what? I don't. But I have to show this off, Cheryl, because someone. Do you know what? Someone asked me. Someone asked me the other day with a question. How did you go from being a CEO in advertising to becoming a nail technician? And I thought that's such a good question. But look at that. Look at my collection. I mean,
I'm impressed,
I can't
and
even tell you.
I'm impressed that it was like literally like where you could reach it,
Oh,
like to
it's
just
right. It's always next to me. I have to, I'm doing the 100 man
yeah.
project, and I've committed to painting 100 men's nails. It does put this. It's
Wow.
amazing. It put this pressure on you. So
And
I
and
took the time.
is that a gel polish? I feel I have to ask now because you brought
No,
it.
it's
Is it a
no.
gel
I don't.
polish?
I know. I'm trained to do gels, but I don't do gels.
Okay.
Partly because they take too long, especially with taking off. But I think
Yeah.
also they kill my nails.
Okay. 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 Everybody that's joined. We're not going to get into the technicalities of what nails. I have Builder Biab for anybody that
Yeah.
knows. If you know, you know. Junior Beeman, good morning. Good morning, friends. Happy Black History Month. I can't believe it's October already. It's
No, it's
as
amazing.
somebody we're deep into the burrs, as we now say, right? September, October, November, December. I've got a funny story about the last time that I had Daniele on here, which I may share. I can't remember if I've even shared it with you, Daniele, in terms of a
You
conversation
know,
I
go on,
had
go on.
after. Yeah. Privilege is as input, not an outcome. So that's interesting. Back to your point, Daniele, about privilege versus privileged. So as an yeah, I get that as an input, not an outcome. So it's potentially an input into somebody's experience,
Yeah,
but it's not the whole. It's not the whole story. It doesn't necessarily mean that the outcome is going to be a certain way.
love that.
I like that. Yeah. Is the system broken or rigged? Which system do you mean, Donald? Just clarify. Good morning, Donald and Butcher. Hope I'm pronouncing
I'm
that correctly
assuming
this morning.
Donald means the patriarchy, the system we exist within.
Ah,
Yeah, and it's a
yeah,
really good
maybe.
question. So one is I think the second thing is it broken or is it intentional? So is it partly
Yeah,
rigged? I would actually say my gut was I just watched the film, the new Leo DiCaprio film. It is a scary movie. I'm going to be honest. It's a really because it gives you an insight into what might be happening in America. Really, and it's there's people. I think it really does tackle racism and actually in that particular case that would be intentional, right? So
yeah,
I think if I look at America, there is some intentional work going to keep the systems it is, and if anything, actually make the system more rigid, more exclusionary. So that is intentional. My experience of the workplaces are that the system is just broken. So I don't think it's as intentional, and I do say, and I remember, and I can't remember her name, but I can't remember her name, but I was at a conference about 7 years ago, and someone talked about men deciding that women get paid less, and I could see her eyes roll, and I was kind of the same, and I was like, I don't think there's a decision. It's just the system again, and the way that everything goes. A lot of the time, people are just oblivious to the system and how it's not
yeah,
working. And I think that for me it is 100% broken. But the one thing, and Cheryl, I'm passionate about this. Um, the one thing I worry about, and it is for example, with ERGs, I'm not a
you're not a
huge
fan.
fan of ERGs simply because they're actually creating tribes. They're actually creating different people. And actually,
Hmm.
what I think we need to do to create change is we all need to go, instead of saying this system hurts me, come over here and help me as an ally. Yeah. Let's talk about the system hurting us and working together to fix it. I think
Yeah,
if we made that shift, all of a sudden, and if we start looking, let's be really clear. If we start looking, I'm not in the global majority in the world, right? I'm in the minority. Um, so I think for me, what we've got to do is actually understand once we start bringing people together, and all these people that women and if we brought women in historically marginalised groups together and work together, that would be the majority in quite a few
Yeah.
businesses. So I think
Yeah.
I just think we need to look at things differently. It doesn't mean you can't have some kind of format to allow people to have safe spaces to speak, because they're still really important. But yes, I think we should be working together to fix the system.
I agree. I agree. Sarah Jane, good morning. Recognizing our points of power and our points of privilege, being grateful for them, and making a decision about what we want to do with them is very empowering. I've never worked with a person yet who doesn't want to do something good with those points. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Sarah, I hear you.
I love this. I think Sarah's lucky. If that's really the
Yeah.
case, I actually think Sarah's lucky. So Sarah, good for you. But I think she's lucky. I know a lot of people with privilege who aren't using that privilege responsibly, and actually aren't doing anything. So I spoke at D&I in grocery last Friday, and I did a poll. It was only 100 people, so between the two
Mm,
sessions, but still on. I asked them the question: how many men are actively leaning in to inclusion diversity? This is not men allies. This is leaning into inclusion diversity. 20.23%. So yes, that's quite a lot of people that aren't leaning in.
yeah. Yeah. And it links back to I guess it links back to what you were saying, Daniela. And I think in particular, you mentioned the US, and I would sort of potentially say to a lesser extent here, but I was talking about this recently, particularly linked actually to the ERGs as well in the States. And actually, when you think about the ERGs in the States were born out of the civil rights movement
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
late 60s. And I would say even today, and probably even more so now, actually, because of it's almost like this tug of war, the backlash. Then, but in the States, I would say even for example with ERGs, it feels like more of a social justice movement
yeah,
rather than, as you say, Daniele, let's collectively work on what are the issues in the system. Does that make sense? And I think, and you look at when we look at sort of observe what's going on in the States, I think we almost kind of understand why. And I say that as somebody who is aware of, for example, individuals, black people, for example, in the States have a very different experience to black people here. And that's not to say, obviously, that there isn't racism here, but it is like on a different level in the States that I think a lot of people in this country don't realize. And I think there is something with the DI model that was kind of like exported to here, that
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
comes with some of those legacies. Do you know what I mean? When actually, probably, particularly for the UK environment, we probably just almost like needed a slightly different version of it because the challenges are different and the culture is different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, sure. And listen, the experience of black people in America is I'm going to say it's horrendous. I mean,
Yeah.
not feeling just the idea of not feeling safe with having police around you and seeing some of the stuff that's happening with ICE right now. But that idea. I mean, I think I'm massively into film. I will be doing a post tomorrow about my favourite films to get people to watch on Black History Month.
Hmm.
I think film is so important. But
Mm,
I one of my favourite films of all time is Do the Right Thing, right? And so,
hmm.
at central to that is again, unfortunately, a man being killed through that police brutality.
Yeah.
Really, really odd, and it's still slightly. But I ran a movie club. I ran a movie club when we went into lockdown. I'm very proud. That movie club was in the top 13 movie clubs across the country at the
What?
beginning of. Yeah, I ran it. I ran it it still exists as a WhatsApp group, but
Bring
I
it
actually.
back.
Yeah, no,
Bring
no,
it
it still
back.
exists. I can put you on there. But I curated 60. I think it was 60 movies, 60 nights in a row. But it was called a Utopia Movie Club, and it was all about bringing to people films that actually help them learn. So most of them were cultural intelligence. There were some that were just about joy and kindness, but really, it's just really odd. But we watched Fruitvale Station. Really, again, a real life example of someone being killed by the police.
Mm.
And I woke up the next morning and George Floyd had been murdered. And it was just so
Mm.
eerie, that
Mm.
connection. But, and again, the thing that I think for a lot of people were the thing that I notice a lot is just because of the work we do, Cheryl, we know I'm just lucky, right? We learn so much more. So for me, unfortunately, George Floyd was just another example of stuff that I've seen in history. But for so many people, that was like shocking. And I think the shocking thing sometimes is, how do you find that shocking? Do you not know what the world is like?
Mm.
And again, it's really interesting. So me and my wife is a childline volunteer. I'm very proud of her and the work that she does, and her name is Tina. Um, and she said when Adolescence came out, we knew we had to watch it together because I do obviously a lot of work with men. But she couldn't. She needed to get her head right because it's hard for her. She knows she's going to feel it. She knows it's really going to hit her. And so we watched it, I think, about 3 weeks after everything and all the talk. And the thing that shocked us the most, again, was that people were shocked by this. And I think the reality is, we do live in a world where, I'm going to come back to that question of is it rigged or is it broken? Um, I think it is partly. I think it's partly both, because I think
Mm.
it's rigged to the extent that uh, the media does only report on certain stories. It does skip out other stories, and so what we're not seeing is we're not seeing the reality of the world we live in. So I think it is broken and it is rigged.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And just let's just circle back onto the ERGs or EBRGs, as Allah has referred to them. Good morning, Allah. It can be dangerous for EBRG, so employee business and or business resource groups, to be tribal, but at their best, they are more like specialists in topics with outreach and welcome to anyone who wants to join. And particularly, I can't second that enough in terms of good ERGs are open. And yeah, as you said, Daniele, sometimes depending on, for example, the sensitivity of certain topics, you may have ERGs that are closed. So, for example, I know that particularly in some organizations, sometimes certain LGBTQ plus meetings may well be closed depending on the topics. But generally, they are open, and it should be about bringing together individuals that want to make an impact to benefit those communities within the context, and challenging the issues, etc. And then, Donald, I wanted to come back to your point here as well. uh, Bringing people together has its challenges. I would challenge you on your ERG take because of the lack of the togetherness, and trying to bring people together has failed. The system is rigged to listen, not act or change. So I guess that challenge there in terms of I guess the benefit of, I guess, having the groups versus trying to tackle everything together. And I guess just correct me if I'm wrong, Donald, but I think what you're basically saying is that the system is rigged to not take action. So maybe,
Yeah,
I think, I don't know, are you saying, Donald, that there's almost like a kind of a faux sort of like listening, but not really any intent to act, is an
I hear
interesting
I
one.
hear Donald, but I wasn't suggesting that we get rid of that ability to have those safe spaces. And
Yeah.
also, I think the other thing that I would say is someone and they're different. Let's be really clear. Someone that's got disability, someone that's black, someone that has LGBTQ, have different experiences, but they are still, the thing that unites them is they understand what exclusion feels like. So
Mm.
getting those people in the room, I disagree that we have to all be exactly the same of what we're experiencing to be able to have a shared understanding and a shared empathy and a shared support system.
Hmm.
That's what. So I don't agree that you have to all be exactly the same to be able to. What you have to have is a shared experience and be able to talk about that experience and be able to talk it openly and talk it safely. So
Mm.
I hear Donald, but at the same time I still think the ERG system is part of the system, and I think we do have to. I do think we have to relook at it. And if everyone keeps on telling me that, but I'm like, it's whatever we're doing at the moment is not working. Let's be really clear. If we're going to businesses, it's not working. So why not try something different? You know, and I'm not suggesting I'm right. I mean, and the one thing I would say is I have done this with an organisation, and they have got rid of the ERG system, and they've created an inclusion champions. It's the proudest thing I've done in my career, and it's absolutely amazing. It's Coca-Cola Europe Pacific Partners, and they have inclusion ambassadors, but they still celebrate Black kids. They still do all the things that ERGs do, but they do it together.
Yeah. I mean, you know, obviously anybody that knows me and knows that, you know, knows my work is, I mean, ERGs for me are way more than, you know, just like celebrating like the awareness days and all of that. But there is something, I think, particularly in this current environment, ERGs have got to be really, they've got to be really smart actually in terms of how they operate. And like you said, ERGs have got to be able to demonstrate that they can work together. So often that is collaboratively. I mean, so Junior, who was on earlier, I don't know whether he's still on. Junior is, for example, global multicultural lead at NatWest. And I know that in their ERGs in particular, a lot of cross working across, you know, the multicultural, the gender, the LGBTQ. They kind of, they almost do sort of like work as one, if that makes sense. And so when I go into organizations and I'm talking to ERGs about, you know, what are the policies, for example, that you want to be tackling, a lot of those policies you might as well work on together, because a lot of them do impact more than one group. And as you say, Daniele, there is strength in numbers. So, you know, maybe all of you, you know, working with the policy owners to say, let's look at this, I don't know, you know, paternal leave policy and come up with something that works, whether you are LGBTQ plus or you are a parent or carer, or you're a, do you know what I mean? So looking at it with that lens anyways is, I believe, was what good ERGs always should have been doing, but especially now in this environment, like you've got to be on your game for sure.
Should we talk about including men, Cheryl?
Yeah, let's do that. Let me just Chris Simcoe, sports seems to have a huge impact on everyday conversations right now. I don't know Chris Simcoe. I don't know whether Daniele does.
No, I would. I'm just going to pick up a comment on sport and its impact.
Okay,
I think sport's really important. I think sport's really important. So I'm an Arsenal fan. I'm very proud to be an Arsenal fan, and I know the stuff that we do as a club is incredible. So, and also I haven't necessarily written about this yet. I used to write every day on LinkedIn, but I needed a break. But it's you know, if you look at, I think it is interesting. We talk about the UK, and there's some horrible stuff happening in the UK. Let's be really clear. The amount of racism, the anti-Semitism that we saw yesterday, the amount of racism that I keep on hearing from Black and brown people is just horrifying. So there's lots of negative things happening in the UK. But I wonder whether what part of the problems, I don't think we celebrate enough the wins. And what I mean by that, as sitting here today, England, I'm going to talk about England, is champions of Europe in football and champions of the world in rugby. You know, and that has to say something about our culture and supporting women and how we've let those sports flourish. So there's a lot to be said, and I just don't think we celebrate those things enough, because I think there are some really good things going. And again, when I talk about ERGs, I don't mean it. I know the work that I'm so in awe of every single person that's actually run an ERG, because you put so much work in. And you know, the other reason I don't like ERGs is because the very people who are being excluded, they're very people that are finding it harder, the ones that have been tasked to do the work. That's the other reason I don't like ERGs. But I don't ever want to criticize the work the ERGs do, because I think they do amazing work. But I think sport, identifying sport as a something that we can look to, I think is really, and that's why I love Gareth Southgate. I thought Gareth Southgate did some really interesting work, and I think there are pockets of sport that I think are really changing. But at the same time, I look at football. It's not a single out. There's never been an out player in the Premiership, and I don't even think in the Championship. I mean, you know, we're still antiquated when it comes to LGBTQ football.
And it kind of links back to, and what I wanted to come back to, which links to, I know some people have commented about the nails, and this links to about the engagement of men in inclusion, because you know, obviously with the work that you're doing, you're I guess inviting men to consider looking at masculinity differently,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
Why do you think men are resistant even to some of those conversations, or are they? Like, do you find, so for the, for example, the fact that you said, you had to take your nail polish, what is the barrier even to like having those sorts of conversations? So forget like the DEI acronym, just the conversation about masculinity. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, you've got so many layers of this, but the first one, I'll go back to what I talked about at the beginning of this session, which is men have been disconnected from their feelings. So they're not used to having these conversations full stop. So
Mhm.
we talk in the industry a lot about the need to be more comfortable being uncomfortable. What people don't understand, and again, if it wasn't clear, it's worth just restating. Any assumptions you have about me are right. I'm a white, straight, neurotypical, cisgender man without disabilities. Um, but we talk about the need to become more comfortable and uncomfortable. But and again, that dinner was the first time I had many privileges, but that dinner was that 39 was the first time I ever experienced being in the out group at work. That's a huge privilege, right? But what people don't realize is when you've spent your whole life and most of your career in that in group, you hardly ever feel uncomfortable. And so all of a sudden, you put people into a space where they're asked to be completely uncomfortable. And guess what? They freeze up. They go, this isn't much fun. I'm going to walk. I'm going to step out. And where corporates have let everyone down, and there aren't many that I can say an exception. Um, where corporates let everyone down is actually there's no accountability. And so what I'm saying, so they at the moment, EDI only succeeds and only connects with the people that see it, that want to get involved. It's not connecting with people. They're not doing it because they have to, right? They're not doing it because this is an imperative in our business that you have to be inclusive. We'll only get this right when non-inclusive people are not being promoted, right? And that's not happening at the moment. And so I think for me, men aren't leaning into the conversation because actually, one, they feel uncomfortable. The second thing, so our male allyship survey said the number one challenge for men as allies, let's be really clear, as allies, is the fear of saying the wrong thing. And Donald, you're so right, but many of us can kill other men. So I'm going to give you a little story. So if you look at adolescence, when adolescence came out, everyone has focused on the boys. Everyone has focused on the boys. My view is we have to start with the men, right? And so Donald's point was a really interesting one. So I painted. I did my first school, which was amazing. We had some really interesting conversations, and these were conversations these boys had never been asked to have. So just talking about healthy masculinity, talking about. I think we covered so many different topics, but I painted out the 36 boys. 32 boys allowed me to paint their nails, just one thumb. 4 said no. Two of those 4 came back in the day, said, sorry, can I please get it done now? Because there was such a buzz and they all of a sudden wanted to do it. And Liam, who's the amazing pastor that brought me in, he's challenged them to keep them for a week. 90% of them kept them after school. At school, great. Took off their nail polish before they went to see their dad. And so there's this that fear of judgment. So that's why I mean it starts with men. Men have to be the role models to their children, to their nephews. I'm not a parent, but to their nephews, to their godchildren, to whoever's around them. And that means and to become a role model, I hate to say it, but most men need to do work, and that work is hard. And what happens is, and I hear people saying, oh, men don't lean in, they're so selfish, it's all about them. And actually, from my experience, it's not all about them. Actually, a lot of the men I know do everything for their family.
Mm.
Yeah, and that has to be commended, right? And they often don't do anything for themselves. And so what I find in workplaces is that men prioritize the stuff that will help them get forward in their career, because we still have this underlying belief and feeling, this, Cheryl. Work is challenging right now for the moment. My wife has 2 jobs, and it's hurting me that I feel hurt inside that for the first time that she's kind of the breadwinner, right? I shouldn't do. I should that shouldn't happen, but it's a reality. And so men tend to prize the stuff that helps their career, and so they're not actually spending time prioritizing on the stuff that I know that at some point in their lives they will find important. So, and the best quote I've ever heard, well, I'm gonna read this. If you want to read this out, Cheryl, because I'm
Yeah, sure. So most of the work on inclusion and engaging men, and apologies that I can't see your name. Sometimes the glitch just means that the names don't pull through. Most of the work on inclusion and engaging men in inclusion is taking place in the workplace, which is a perfectly good place to start. However, I think there can be a greater impact if we take this discussion out into our local communities outside of the corporate construct to the more general experience of men and women in our day-to-day lives. I totally agree. And hence when
yeah.
when you mentioned Gareth Southgate, I think he's a really good example of somebody that's doing this out there, like in the public discourse. Yeah.
And I actually think there's more. I mean, I'm happy that person actually seeing a lot of engaging men in the workplace. I'm
Yeah.
still not seeing it as much, but I think for me, what has happened outside the workplace is we are seeing an increase in the amount of men's circles, for example. Andy's men's club being a brilliant example of that. Talk club being a brilliant example of that. And those things we should only ever applaud. I mean, I go to these things myself as a man, partly because so I get my own support and do my own work and my own, but also partly to see what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And without any, because I know I've had pushback, people saying men only spaces, they're so dangerous, we can see the harm, and I understand that because they've been harmful in the past, right? Really harmful. But every single one I've been into, there's a kindness, there's a connection, and all of the men that I go to want to be a more healthy form of masculinity.
Yeah. I am. Thank you, Teo. Thank you for that comment. It's very vulnerable expression. I assume you're talking about the breadwinner comment and where we are in terms of the work, etc. It would be remiss of me to not talk about intersectionality when it comes to men, and I know you've sort of touched on this. So this is our second LinkedIn Live. Daniele is one of very few, a very small number of individuals that have come on this more than once. But the first time we were on, I don't know if you remember, Daniele, but somebody made a comment about not recognizing themselves in the conversation. And it was a black man, and I ended up having an offline conversation with them afterwards, which was very interesting. But I guess the point that he was making was that the experience, and sometimes even around this work, when we talk about including men in inclusion, and particularly when we talk about things like allyship, we're often actually just talking about somebody like a Daniele, right? Straight, white, male, able-bodied, cis, da 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 da. But there is the intersectionality point, and I don't know, is this something? Are you thinking about this more with the men that you're working with, the intersectionality and the different needs, and even in terms of that privilege versus the privileged? Is it different? So is it different in terms of engaging men depending on, the intersectionality of identities?
Yeah, because it's the stories you tell are going to be different, right? Well, there's no doubt that I mean, if I'm not going to connect with everyone, right, in the same way. But and the key, let's be really clear: the people that I need to connect with the most, are the people that like me. That's my superpower. So for me, that's the most important thing. But I do. So if we've really looked careful. I run a male allyship program. Everything on that is intersectional. So if you think about, or I do a lot of, because it's a coaching program, I don't give them any content. So it's, I'm just there as a facilitator. But if you look at the content they get throughout the program, I've got everyone from every background that they can access, listen to, read from, etc., etc. But you can't get away from the fact that we've had, I think, our fourth cohort. I don't know about this cohort, but the previous cohort we had one person who was LGBTQ. And in that particular example, they did feel the fact that they were LGBTQ because there were 11 straight men, right? And again, it's the thing that you don't want to do is create another space where someone feels exclusion. So I work really hard to look at it, and I do I do spend a lot of time with people from historically marginalised groups in the work they do. They just happen to
Yeah.
also be my friends, and so I'm learning the whole time about their experiences. But I can never, ultimately, I can never really, truly live those experiences. Or so for me, wherever I can, I will bring other people in. So for me,
Yeah.
it's about, if I look at, if I'm co-delivering, I would never bring another white straight man with me, right? So I would bring
Yeah.
someone that's different and from a different intersection. And often
Yeah.
I'll look at the client and I'll say, okay, who's in the senior leadership team? Who can I make sure is alongside me, who represents them as a person? So I do think it's important to have um, to recognize that we don't have all the answers. We're not going to connect with everyone perfectly. I don't know whether that
Yeah.
did answer your question.
Yeah, no, it did. It did. I guess the thing that I was maybe getting at, and that this, you might be aware of this already, but I know, for example, there's this new Centre for, I would say, is it Centre for Policy Research on Men and Boys? This new Richard Reeves organisation that's like here in the UK, which is amazing that we've got this. And if anybody isn't following that group, I'd highly recommend that. But they're about, if they haven't already released it, I think they're about to release some additional in-depth findings on the male suicide statistics. And I know when I've looked at that, for example, by ethnicity, it's wildly different. As in, I think, because I commented on this on a post of theirs literally like a couple of weeks ago, and even they said, yeah, it is interesting because, for example, when you look at male suicides for East Asia, for men from like an East Asian, South Asian background, it's the same as white women. Do you know what I mean? So it's really interesting. There is something going on about the experiences, even potentially as it pertains to masculinity, which can be very different in the same way that feminism and obviously this, which is where intersectionality started, right? The experiences can be very different, and I just wondered whether that's a lens that you've considered in your work, particularly around like masculinity and those pressures. You gave that example of the boys and the nails and I just wondered whether it's maybe something to explore
Yeah, no,
afterwards, as I've mentioned on.
I think we should
Yeah.
always look to make sure that we are representing as many people as possible. I
Yeah.
think one of
Yeah.
my favorite, Manny, who was on the first cohort, I thought was really interesting what he
Yeah.
said. He said he's the first person. He's a black, a young black man, and he said, "I don't need to see someone that looks on the stage. I need to see someone that represents me and
Yeah.
listens to me and make sure that my trust is actually sharing my voice and my needs and what I'm
Yeah.
talking about." And
Yeah.
I think that was
Yeah.
a really interesting point, because otherwise, if you say someone has to look like me, all of a sudden you're like going, okay, all of a sudden, what do we have to make sure that everyone in your organization looks like? But
Yeah.
saying that I have to trust that they represent and they show my voice is 100%, and that's what
Yeah.
I was very surprised, but I was one of my most interesting experiences was actually in Kenya. I was on a course, and we started talking about LGBTQ and being gay, and they were all very. One was a reverend, one was a pastor, and they were all very, I'm not going to say homophobic because they're lovely people, but it was problematic, some of their views, right, because of the Christianity and being devout Christian. But they were just so but I was there to talk about represent LGBTQ and to talk about why to really talk about why their views is really exclusionary and it's damaging and why
Hmm.
it hurts and why I don't think it is Christian, right? Uh, and so a gay man said, "Oh, why didn't you get someone else who was gay to do that? Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, I was in the middle of Kenya with there was only 15 people in this whole complex. What do you think that person might just grab someone and they happen to be gay? I mean, the reality is we do have to be able to have these conversations for others.
Yeah.
But I thought what was interesting to that point is if you can find someone that lives it, that's even
Hmm.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my final question is going to be just about the allyship point. Because sometimes, even particularly with ERGs, right? I know that sometimes when I ask organisations, do you have any men's groups? Do you create spaces for men's? I mean, so first of all, I get a lot of grief on LinkedIn when I talk about the need for organisations to
Yeah.
create spaces for men. But sometimes some organisations say, well, we've got a men's allyship group. And I'm like, that's not the same. That's not the same. So my question is, do you think that part of the issue is, have men, and it's linked to the backlash, have men run out of empathy for allyship? Do you know what I mean? Are men fed up of just being cast as the allies, like that's their only role? Are they fed up of it?
So I run brave spaces for businesses, and that's partly a listening session to see how men are feeling. And I said, what one of the questions is, what is your biggest challenges? Number 6 on the list, and it wasn't necessarily in order, but number 6 was being a middle-aged straight white man is my biggest challenge. The reality is, whether you like it or not, whether it's real or not, men are feeling, and masculinity itself are feeling put down the whole time. I've been in this scenario, I'm not going to, without giving details, but I've been in a business where for 5 years, all I did was being criticised every single time. And because of who I represented, because of the white man, no one ever gave me praise. Do you know what? I ended up nearly having a mental health breakdown, right? It just got overwhelming. It was horrible. It was relentless. That's what it can feel like right now to be a white straight man. It's relentless criticism, criticism. We International Men's Day is on the 19th of November. I wouldn't even dare talk about celebrating men, because everyone goes, you can't celebrate men. It's an International Men's Day every day, which makes me really angry, because that just completely ignores the intersection of men. What? So you're telling me a black man without disability is his day every day, right? No, it's not. But I think I talk about marketing International Men's Day because, God forbid, we celebrate men. So I do think that there's a feeling that everything is, and I love what Caitlin Moran did. She has done a lot of work saying, let's on Twitter, let's celebrate men, let's look at what men have done. She's done some threads, and I think we need to. I think for Valentine's Day, I think one of my most engaged posts was I wrote, I love men, and I gave all the reasons why I love men. I love women. I love non-binary people. I love everyone. But, I do love men, because I just think there's so much power in that. And actually, I'll go back to it. I think the system is damaging most of those men. I say most, but the system, but it's damaging most of those men, however they look. And so what we have to do is, once we start showing those men that this system is broken and harming them, then we've got the opportunity to bring them on the journey to change it with us. And that's how we create change, by actually working together to fix a system that is currently broken or rigged, as Donald said. And actually we can combat that, and we can go, do you know what? Let's make this better. And 50% of the men that I know we're over time, but 50% of the men that I've met through Hard as Nails have tried to take their own life. 50%. I don't want men to get to that crisis point where they're actually reaching out and understanding that actually we need to do something different, and actually we need to find other ways of actually interacting and being.
Indeed. Dudley, good morning, Dudley. How are you doing? It's how we react, especially for those coming from a point of privilege. What if for the women that are maybe watching this, what can they be doing to support the men in their lives, but also colleagues as well? So colleagues and the men in their lives. How can women show allyship to men?
Yeah, and I love the fact you answer that, Cheryl. We've been running our definition that we use of allyship actually includes everyone. And the way we did that is we say women, historically marginalised groups, or anyone who is struggling. And there are a lot of men struggling right now. I think compassion and empathy is the things that I would say. But also, I do. Esther Perel talked about it. Esther Perel looked at how feminism has allowed women for the last 50 years to really look at who they are, identify who they want to be, and she says men now have the opportunity to do the same. But then she says, but I worry that men and women don't have the tools to do so. And listen, I haven't spoken to Esther. Maybe I should reach out to her. But what I think she meant, so we know that men don't have those tools, right? Those tools to communicate. They don't necessarily have the network. That's why things like men's circles are so important. Hopefully, that's why some of the work I'm doing on Brave Space. So anyone on here, if you'd like to come to a Brave Space, I've got 2 Brave Space coming up. You do send a link afterwards, Cheryl, or I might just put it on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, and put it in the comment and put it in the comments of this thread of this
Yeah, that's
live.
perfect.
Yeah.
So I would say that compassion and empathy, and that empathy is going to be different to the empathy you often will give to your female friends. I think someone said to me, "How can I give you empathy if you don't share your feelings?" And that's the challenge, right? How do we start finding ways to support each other along this journey? My biggest allies have been women. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's been amazing, and I think where we do an event called Masculinity to the Workplace. We've got it coming out on the 19th of November again, where I've really been pleasantly surprised is every year the first people to give me feedback, even though this is an event that's specifically designed to engage people that look like me, they will come back to me and say, thank you. Women will come back and say, thank you for that. Was amazing. I now have a different view and empathy for men than I had before. So actually understanding that are trying to put, again, it's the same thing. Listen, that we say to everyone, listen and try and put yourself in their shoes. Really simple.
Yeah, listen, put yourself in their shoes. And one of the words that I always use around this work generally is grace, right? Let's just give people grace, especially. And I think it's Donald that said in the comments as well about language, and you've said about that men don't always have the language, and because as girls we've been raised to talk about these things our entire lives, right? So by the time you get into the workplace and you're in your 30s, 40s and 50s, we've been practicing this for decades. Men are just coming to this new, right? So let's not chop them down as soon as they say something that we think offends or whatever. Let's just give a bit of grace in this space is the one thing I would say. Daniele, it's been an absolute pleasure. What's the one thing that you would want people to take away from this, or the one thing you would want organizations to do if they're listening to this conversation?
So firstly, International Men's Day is coming up. I will say this: if you're marking every other day, but you're not marking International Men's Day, your strategy, your I&D strategy is not fit for purpose. Just going to say it. So it isn't. It really isn't, because you're not.
I agree.
And it was really. And I asked people at the and I spoke to a client yesterday, and she just said it really woke her up, because I asked the grocery aid, the 100 people, I asked, put your hand up if you did anything for white straight men during National Inclusion Week. There were 3 hands up out of 100, and I'm like, so National Inclusion Week, you have excluded your majority of your staff. Just think about that. And again, let's be clear. I know that National Inclusion Week was about making sure other people, but we have to go back to the name. National Inclusion Week needs to be for everyone, and so therefore you do need to be doing something for your majority of your staff. So I would just say this: if you haven't been engaging your men engaging your men meaningfully does not mean just ask them to be allies. So look at what support are you giving men within your organization, and what are you doing to support them. I think when we talk about equality and equity, I think a lot of people have forgotten that equity is so important. Some groups need more support than others, but it doesn't mean the other groups don't need support.
Yes, it's an and. It's an and, not or. It's and. Okay. And then where's best to connect with you? Is that here on LinkedIn? And just give us again the dates of your next your upcoming events. And if anybody's thinking about this sort of thing, because I've been on one of your, it wasn't Brave Spaces. What was it? The one
you came to Together Space. You came to
Together Space. Amazing, absolutely amazing conversation.
Yeah,
so I would definitely Definitely
Yeah,
recommend it.
to be honest, I'm very proud of the Brave Spaces. The feedback score I've got on the last 3 Brave Spaces has been 9.9 out of 10, 9.7 out of 10, and 9.9 out of
Yeah,
10. This is
yeah,
getting men who are strangers to come in and talk about uncomfortable conversations. So once you do it, they're there. So the next one, actually, it's amazing how time's flying. I'd even forgotten it is. But next Friday is World Mental Health Day. So at midday, I am doing a uh, I'm doing managing your mental health Brave Space. So please do join.
okay,
And then on 19th of November is our Masculine to the Workplace event, which is
yeah,
on supporting boys to men to role models. So
okay.
again, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find those things.
Amazing, amazing. Daniele, thank you so much. And also to everybody
Pleasure.
that joined the conversation and for all of the comments. Thank you. And please do, reach out to Daniele if you've got any other questions, or, you want him to come in and engage with this, what can be quite a hard to engage with group. Or if you just want him to come in and paint some nails,
Yeah, no, I do. I listen.
then
I've already got bookings for International Men's Day to paint people's nails. It's great.
yeah, and I love Ate. I like your last comment. It's
Yeah,
tough
it
to
is.
strike a balance between faith, spirituality, and homosexuality, especially in the global south. I tell you what, though, and Daniele touched on it in terms of with Kenya, but one of the things I've seen with ERGs, there's a lot more LGBTQ plus ERGs in the global south than you would realize, which I think, so that's a good thing. I think in terms of
Yeah,
they are actually springing up and
and I have
making,
I have to
creating
say that
safe spaces.
the conversation we had, I was talking about Kenya, was amazing. Right?
Yeah.
They were very, a lot of the time, all we need is conversations, and then you start to realize that people see things differently.
Yeah, and to your point, Aoteo, it's one of the challenges is how you ensure that there is mutual respect of those differences in terms of belief, etc., and all of that. So, great point. Thank you everybody for joining. If you joined us live, if you're watching us on the replay, thank you for taking an hour out of your day to watch this, Daniele. It's been amazing as always.
As always, thank you, Cheryl. Very honoured to be back.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.